All right, let's get started. So I will turn on my video for a little bit, and then we'll go back to sharing screen. Welcome, everybody. I am here in a very lonely office that is built for 60 or more people. I'm here with two colleagues who are socially distancing themselves from each other, and we are on Broadway in New York City in a time that is strange. And the street is quiet, and it's rush hour in New York when I was coming in, and it was empty roads and just a strangely easy to navigate place. So I hope that you are all doing well where you are. I hope that your kids and your puppies, your spouses are behaving and letting you getting a little bit of work done. And I know this is an incredible time to be in. A few small housekeeping notes before we get started. One, we will make this recording available afterwards. We've heard from a few folks that they might be hard of hearing. It will be a little bit difficult to follow some of the audio, although the slides themselves will be very descriptive. We will also do captioning after the fact on YouTube if you miss anything. So we see you, and we will try to be as helpful as possible. Second thing, as you're using the chat, note that the default is just to all panelists, which is me and two of my colleagues who will be monitoring this as well. If you do want to say something to everybody, just note to change it to all panelists and attendees. In terms of doing questions, there's a separate Q&A function, which will help us take questions at hand. There are already more than 400 people on the line right now, and that number is growing pretty quickly. So use that, otherwise things will likely get lost in the chat, and we don't want to lose any of your questions. And with that, we will get started. I do want to note before we start that because things are moving so quickly, this is actually one of 5 webinars that we'll do every week at this time. So we'll give information later on how to sign up for those, but given how fast all the news is changing, we want to make sure that everyone has all the up-to-date information and that we're learning from each other on a week-by-week basis about what's working and what isn't. So I'm delighted to be here with you. I wish you were under circumstances that were different, but we're really excited to do as much as we can to be helpful to you. And with that, let us go. So today's agenda, we will do introductions. We will talk about what's happening in the world, although many of you know that. We'll talk about some trends that we're seeing with nonprofit organizations. We'll share our best recommendations, and then we'll talk about next steps and future learning opportunities. And before I forget, Christine notes that I should wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day, which I hope that you are celebrating well. My name is Patrick Schmidt. It is my Saints Day, normally a much more festive version of this. I am the co-CEO of a company called FreeWill. Here I am in an office that at this point has no people in it. Just a little bit of background on me and my wonderful, brilliant co-founder, Jenny. So my background is I've been in human rights work, in politics. I ran email fundraising for President Obama, where a team and I invented a lot of the best practices in digital fundraising. Jenny's my incredible partner. She helped start the Impact Investment Fund at Bain Capital after finishing at the top of her class at Harvard, one of the smartest people I've ever met, and it's a joy to work with her. Jenny and I met at Stanford, where we did a ton of research around plan giving and what was holding people back from giving and what the opportunities were. We are also super fortunate, just incredibly so, to be supported and working alongside 55 wonderful humans at FreeWill. This is a picture from the time when we could all be really close together. And we generate about $1.2 billion in committed bequests. FreeWill was also named top 50 philanthropists by Town and Country, which was really special. But let's talk about what we are doing right now. So first, we have been focused on COVID-19 and its potential effects on the nonprofit world for almost 2 months. This was sort of unusual, and it's because our head of operations, who is a brilliant Chinese-American woman, her family is originally from Wuhan. Her grandparents are still there. So we were monitoring the situation very early and have been starting to do contingency planning much earlier than most organizations in case things got worse. We also started thinking much earlier than most people about what this means for the nonprofit world. as a startup, we are also used to moving extremely quickly and adjusting to rapidly changing circumstances. But what we hear from nonprofits is that historically, they say that they are neither nimble nor fast moving. And that is okay. It's actually not really a fault. To build a great institution, it requires consistency and doing the same thing extremely well over and over again. There's certainly a difference between a startup and a 200-year Ivy League institution or a great community organization that's been around for 80 years. It does mean that you guys often don't move as fast, but in part because that's so much of what you've already done has been figured out. But in this time, when moving fast is paramount, our goal and our mission as an organization for the next few months is to help you and your partner organizations navigate a situation that is moving with unprecedented speed, and to help your organization continue to survive and to thrive in challenging, difficult, uncertain times. So that is what we are here for. If you have any questions throughout, if there's any tips that we can help with, anything that you need, just feel free to pop those in the Q&A, please. Before we get in, let's talk about you for a moment. So thank you to everyone who filled out our survey earlier in the week. Here's what we heard from you. So who has signed up for this webinar? At this point, 550 different nonprofit professionals, primarily in plan giving, but not exclusively so. Folks are here from the US, from Canada, from Australia, though I did receive a few emails from the Australians here, hoping that this would be recorded because it's 3 a.m. Wednesday in Australia right now. So we'll say hello to you, Australia, when you are hearing this recording tomorrow. We hope all that is well down under, and keep in touch with us. And overwhelmingly, you told us that you're focused on how to get your team, yourself, your organization through this crisis. So this is a big moment for you, and we're doing what we can to help. We also asked, what are you worried about this week? 51% of you said we are worried about not being able to hit goals, which makes sense. 64% of you say you're worried about the health and safety of coworkers. 57% say the health and safety of donors. And 10% say potential layoffs or losing my job, which is a potential concern in a steep downturn. 25% of you say all of the above. So there's a lot going on in your head, in my head, in our team's head right now. We also asked, how are you feeling? 60% said anxious. I can certainly relate to that, and I imagine many of you are feeling that way. 21% said confused. Also, 20% said happy. People are resilient, and it was great to see that. 15% said energized, in the same way, that this is a challenge that we'll have to take on together, and we're ready to do so. Okay, let's talk about what's happening in the world. And much of this you've seen, but to get us all on the same page, I'll go through this relatively quickly. So first, as you know, the CDC recommends that people over 60, those with underlying conditions, avoid contact as much as possible. There is a strong recommendation to avoid visiting nursing homes. Schools, restaurants, gym, bars, etc. are closed in many major cities and in some states, certainly true in New York where we are. All of Italy, South Korea, Spain, now San Francisco are under lockdown where people are asked not to do anything except get groceries, get medicine, potentially go outside for exercise, but socially distance. This is a preview of what might happen in other places, including most major cities, but also beyond. We see a question that says the survey results will they be available in PDF? We will send out the full session, both on webinar for a recording so you have with audio and the PDF as well. Last thing to note is that people under 50 are less affected and may have undiagnosed cases, which is an important thing to note. In China, the CDC released these results. This is the Chinese CDC, fatality rate by age. And so you can see that it disproportionately affects older folks to an enormous degree. Many young people are healthy and fine, many older people are not. These statistics may or may not be accurate. China has struggled with reporting of cases, although they've done an excellent job overall, but it is likely that the magnitude differences are correct. And so it's just simply true that 70 and 80-year-olds are at a much higher risk than anybody else. What else is happening in the world? From an economic standpoint, the stock market is down at least 30% from its peak, and a recession seems quite possible. Small businesses are facing significant losses. In New York, all restaurants and bars are closed, and many may face layoffs or close. Tourism and service industries are being hit particularly hard, I'm sure you can imagine. But also, there is some really good news. And if you see humans, once they get their heads around a problem, they are beginning to change behavior and take opportunities for connection and for joy and for being productive. So one of the favorite videos I saw this week is that Italians are singing songs together out their windows to boost morale during their lockdown. On Twitter and social media, the name of the song goes out at 6 o'clock sharp. Everybody opens their doors, plays instruments, sings. It's really amazing to see. In Spain, a fitness instructor is standing on his roof to lead all of the people in a neighboring building from their balconies in workout routines. And so really interesting things that are happening, and people are being extremely creative. Okay, let's talk about what's happening with nonprofit organizations. First question, are you working from home? 46% said yes, 40% said no, but I expect to soon, and 14% said no, and I don't expect to. Our understanding is that many of these answers came in on Thursday and Friday of last week, and then if we ask people again on Wednesday, the number of people working from home or expect to soon will be dramatically higher. Have you canceled fundraising events? Even by the end of last week, this answer was overwhelmingly yes. 80% said yes, they had. 14% said no, but we are currently considering it. And the remaining 6% had no fundraising events. If you canceled events, are you offering refunds? Most people did not have refunds appropriate. And so that is what the NA is, the big green section. But 36% said yes. And a few others said no, but we're giving credit towards future events. The other issue is around programmatic revenue. So Harvard, Stanford, Columbia, and rapidly followed by other colleges have canceled in-person classes indefinitely. There may be no reunions this spring. There may be no graduation. It's possible a class does not come in the fall, and that begins to have a real shift on revenue. Many college sports have been canceled indefinitely. March Madness, as you know, other spring sports. Fall sports that begin practicing over the summer have not yet made a determination. So at my alma mater of Georgetown, pictured at the right, they've already moved to fully remote classes. Everybody has been sent home. Similarly, nonprofit theaters, museums, orchestras, symphonies are closing indefinitely and seeing a drop in ticket revenue. And we've also asked people, are you still doing donor visits, which is the bread and butter of most major gift officers, most planned giving officers. 52% said they've already canceled it. And this is last week. Our guess is that that number would be considerably higher this week. 45% said we are not canceling yet, but some donors are canceling on us. And so this is a very real challenge. All right, so first, we're going to go through some bad news. And I apologize for sharing this, but it's important that you and your teams be incredibly prepared. So the most recent recession was in 2008 and 2009. During that time, total giving dropped by 7% in 2008, and then by another 6.2% in 2009. Notably, giving by people with incomes of more than $200,000 dropped considerably more than giving by people who made less than $100,000. So historically, small donors have been impacted less than major donors who may have more wealth in the stock market or bonus income or other things like that. This recession may be especially hard for nonprofits if things continue. And so it's important to get our heads around this one. All previous recessions, from the Great Depression to 2008, hurt people's ability to give. This recession also hurts people's ability to ask, and it hurts your ability to ask. There are more than 10,000 fundraising professionals in the US who are major gift officers or plan giving officers, etc. These folks rely almost exclusively on one-to-one meetings and events. That is what they're excellent at. They're still highly competent humans, but their great training is in this one-to-one relationship building. What does that look like? And this is also going to be challenging to hear, but expect that for the next 4 to 12 months, there may be very little non-essential travel. There may be no large or even small events. There may be no donor visits to older folks. Note, this is not a certainty. We are not epidemiologists, we don't pretend to be, but if you look at what's happening in other countries, it would be highly unusual if within 2 or 3 weeks we were back to normal. And it's more likely that this will be months and potentially longer, and that high-risk populations will be slower to rebound into normal life. And so this is going to be very challenging for gift officers. No travel, no events, no donor visits. Hard to hear, but also we can take advantage of this moment. When we asked, though, right now 64% of people said they have no plan on how to change fundraising in this context. It is also the case that 40% said they are very confused about how to do well in this new environment. But, so that is the bad news. There is certainly a path forward, and folks that are adaptable and focused can be wildly successful in this moment. So back to the webinar's title, here is how we think to be thoughtful, kind, effective, and safe during this moment. Coming back for a moment, remember the Italians? Remember the Spanish fitness instructor? There are ways to be creative that will bring joy and connection to many people. First things first, on events and visits, please, please, please be extremely cautious with older donors. We know that people have worked very hard on galas, on thank you luncheons, etc. You will likely postpone or cancel those events for 6 months or more. And you want to have a plan that involves basically no seminars, no galas, no donor visits for potentially the majority of 2020. Big, challenging, difficult, super, super important. The other thing we'll say, and this is actually less obvious but critical, is do it soon. Rather than just waiting weeks and months, do we or don't we, that will take up so much mental energy that it will be hard for you to do anything differently, and you may end up stuck without being able to generate the kind of funds that you need. So do it soon, pull the trigger. We can see what's happening in other countries. It's unlikely that you'll have serious events, especially with older folks, in the next few months, and then you can get to work on what to do instead. So hard to hear, but incredibly important. And we noticed on our own team, actually, that we were going back and forth between do we work from home, do we not? And what we realized is we said, great, go work from home, because even if it's a little bit less efficient, the uncertainty is damaging our productivity. And so certainty allows you to then be more creative. Remember also that your donors' lives are changing very quickly, and so you'll have to adapt to a new life for them. They'll be home. Many will feel bored. Many will feel isolated. Many will feel lonely. Some of you may already feel that way. few questions on cancellations. Just to clarify, a lot of us have postponed spring and summer events to the fall. Are you suggesting that we go ahead and cancel those events through the fall right now? I would suggest that you cancel all events through the summer and that you actively start making plans in case the fall event is canceled. There's a very big risk to just waiting and seeing and not aggressively working on plan B. You may want to treat even fall events as plan B and not plan A. Donors will also want to have impact, but their ability to visit your organization to volunteer is severely constrained. So key point here, that people still want to help, but they may have fewer avenues to do so. And they're overall hungry for connection, for content, and for a chance at impact. If you think about those things, connection, content, chance at impact, it will really help lead your way. So just as a note, to see how dramatically people's lives have shifted, this is what's called a Google Trends graph. It is a map of who was searching what over the last 12 months on Google. It's one of the best tools to actually see what people are interested in or not. So this is a map for hand sanitizer. And you can see that very few people have searched hand sanitizer until everybody searched hand sanitizer. And so this is just an example of how quickly people's thought processes are changing. The other thing to note is that interest in estate planning is actually at an all-time high. So for those of you in plan giving, this is especially important. This is a graph of people searching make a will online. And you can see is that March is the highest ever recorded in the history of Google. This is a similar search on how to make a will. You can see that graph generally go up and to the right, and you see how dramatically higher it is in March 2020 compared to any point in time since 2004. Really stunning. I know a lot of plan giving folks are always trying to figure out, how do I get people to take action? This is a moment where people are more focused on this than they've ever been before. On our own site, and I'll share some data with you that we're seeing, year-over-year traffic is up 120%. And among will makers, meaning anyone who's making a will, charitable donations are up 100% over this time last year. So not only are people more interested in estate planning, they are also more interested in thinking charitably. So let's get to our part 2 of recommendations. Do not slow your plan giving marketing. Donors, as you might know, have more time than ever. Donors may be more focused on estate planning than they have ever been in their lives. But you do want to be thoughtful. So first, in a letter, in an email, I'll walk you through something we drafted for the Fairness Project. Big things to remember are to reference the context and how your organization are helping. So patients just asked this question. How do you feel about including an acknowledgement of COVID-19 in their solicitations? We think it may be irresponsible not to, given that it's the top thing on everybody's mind. In this context, and I'm going to point, you don't have to read this whole email. In the top line, it says, in light of new security, the Fairness Project continues to serve working families across the country, and your help is needed more than ever. And if you jump down to paragraph 4, give a cash gift, it says your gift will be put to immediate use on providing paid sick leave and medical coverage for workers. So they are an advocacy organization, and they're tailoring it to this exact moment. The second thing that we highly recommend, because some people say, even though it is a high time for estate planning, might it be inappropriate to talk about plan giving in a moment like this? And we understand that concern. But in fact, it is the moment where people most need to hear from you about plan giving. And what we recommend here is what we call the triple option strategy. And we've tested this with healthcare organizations and other places before all this became a big concern. And it actually can be more effective than a standalone message. So it's a really important tactic to learn both now and in the future. Here's what this looks like. We say, there are multiple ways for you to support the Fairness Project. And then we give 3 options. And in this case, give a cash gift, Amazon Smile. The Fairness Project is a FreeWill partner, so they're promoting that. If you're not a FreeWill partner, no problem, that's great. You can also use this to encourage people to include a bequest or make another type of planned gift. The reason this works is that in the research that Russell James and others have done, people are wont to think about their own mortality at any point. And if you can present several options, it allows them to think about different ways to give instead of framing it around their mortality. This allows you then to include planned giving in a way that becomes more accessible because people are entering it with a different mindset. So we'd highly encourage you to do this. After the webinar, perhaps, or in the week to come, we can make some of these templates available for anybody who needs them. It's incredibly important. It's an incredibly effective way to do so, and your donors will respond extremely well. The third thing we'll say in marketing before getting into one-to-one visits is be a human. So if you are writing from home, say that you're writing from home. No one's expecting you to be perfect in this time. If your team is stressed, that is okay. Our team at FreeWill, many of those folks are anxious. That is totally human and okay, and we can share that with you without feeling surprised by it. If you guys are making decisions on the fly, or if things are moving faster than you're used to, you can say that as well. Nobody expects you to have all the answers in a moment like this. Here's an example of an email that you could send, or the opening of an email that you could send. I am working from our living room in Fairfax today next to a restless 3rd grader and a louder than usual puppy. But I'm still writing to you because this is important. This allows people to connect with you on a one-to-one level instead of feeling like you are a faceless institution. Many of the best nonprofits do this regularly. Some older institutions may be a little bit more reticent, but in a moment like this, people are deeply interested in human connection and want you to acknowledge the deeply human aspect of something like this. Elizabeth asked whether we'll send out these slides. We certainly will afterwards. Okay, and recommendation part 3 is on visits. So these visits are in quotes because you should not be meeting one-to-one with your donors, especially your older donors. First, remember the telephone, this thing on the right. Donors are more likely to answer the phone than any time in the last 15 years. You can check in on donors and update how your organization is changing. We'll also be providing phone scripts coming soon for anyone who needs it. But if you think about what this looks like, this is a time to build an extremely strong relationship with your donors. Just call and say, I wanted to see how you're doing. I also thought you might be interested in how organization X is addressing this. Do you mind if I share a few things with you? And that's it. And you can follow up a week or 2 later if you want to make an ask, but this is a good moment to change. One other tip that we really like, and we're starting to see some of our team use, is go for a virtual walk, which means that if you're in a suburb, if you're in a rural area where it's safe to go outside and you can be distant from other people, maybe pick a time where you and your donor, or even you and a colleague, are putting on a headset, taking out your cell phone, and going for a walk together, even if you're not in the same place. And it's just a moment of adaptability that shows you're creative and caring and value this together time, even in a time of social distancing. All right, second, many of you are so used to in-person conversations and your marketing team writes amazing messages, but this is a great time for one-to-one correspondence. So you can use 2/3 of the same content for every donor, but just a little bit of personalization will make them feel really seen and heard. Again, authenticity trumps quality. So in your one-to-one communication, be a human. I'm having trouble focusing with my dog yapping, but I still wanted to reach out. I'm going a little stir crazy. I thought you might be also. I just wanted to say hello. These things are totally appropriate to say. They're totally fine. They will bring joy. And third, just as a note, we don't really do a lot of direct mail here, but mail is low risk. Sending letters is low risk, says the CDC. It is a little bit harder to engage. And so if you want to start a conversation, a handwritten note might be not the best thing, but it's certainly an additional thing. If you find yourself with time on your hands and a bunch of extra greeting cards, as far as we know, mail will continue to run in places like South Korea and Spain and Italy. Mail has not been interrupted. And so you may think about next time you're at grocery shopping, stacking up on a 20 or 30 greeting cards and a bunch of stamps that you can use over time. Okay, and so those two are great. And if you only do the first two things, you'll be more than fine. You'll build stronger relationships, etc. But we did want something for people who really wanted to push the envelope and try something a little bit wilder, but really, really welcome. And so world-class emails probably include video. And here's what I mean by this. If you work in an orchestra, and your cellist is working from home or not doing much, you can have her set up her phone and record 2 minutes of playing. It doesn't have to be excellent. The sound quality doesn't have to be great. It can be on an Android or an iPhone, and it will still be incredibly welcome. If you are at a museum, email a photograph of one of your paintings and a video of your tour guide explaining one of them. That tour guide can be in his or her own apartment. Doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't have to be great. They can stutter, they can use filler words. It's totally fine. People will really appreciate that level of humanity. If you're a college, have a brief video of a professor talking about relevant research, or even seeing 3 minutes of an online class and what that might look like will be really interesting to somebody who is in the class of 1970 or 75, where they can't imagine having online class instead of being on campus. So these things can be done in an hour or less. They don't need to be polished. You don't need a videographer. Here's a few tips on making that really easy. So just to reiterate this, because everyone, or so many nonprofits that we talk to are really perfectionist, this is not a time for perfectionism. Low quality is fine. It can be shot on your phone. It can be uploaded to YouTube. Your 4th grade daughter or son can hold the video if you're recording. It's pretty easy. Upload it to YouTube, put the link in email, done in less than half an hour. You can send this out to all of your prospects, and they'll feel really thought after and connected to you. It can be short. 2 minutes is fine. It can be longer if you want to, but it doesn't need to be. Remember, this is really a moment where the thought counts. And when you're brainstorming for your organization, think about what would bring joy to people who are otherwise alone or lonely or isolated. And so even if it's just a quick photo of one of the animals at the zoo and you describing a few cool facts about your zoo and that animal, they'll really like it. And if you address it to that person, it will bring a lot of joy in a moment where they need it. So we have more recommendations, and we'll get to them soon. A few things to note here. Please do not hold events or visits, as we spoke about. This may change. A lot of you asked about the timeline. 6 months is best estimate. Again, we are not epidemiologists, but it would be very surprising for anything meaningful to happen with events in the next 3 to 4 months. So you want to have at least a plan around what you're going to do if you don't hold events at all in the next 3 to 4 months, and may not hold them in 6 to 9 months. Do not wait to make this decision. and be cautious of being distracted by that decision instead of moving to what's next. 2, keep marketing. You will be successful. This is a moment where people are ready to hear from you, and you can be thoughtful about it. And creative. So use the triple option. Think about phone calls. Think about low quality video as easy, low cost, able to work from home options for you. And do not be afraid to learn quickly. We're all in this together. Keep sharing what you're doing, what's working. Share what isn't working, which some people can be embarrassed by, but it's so helpful to learn from other people's mistakes, so we do not all have to do the same. Okay, here is what's next. First, one of my colleagues is going to post a survey in the chat in Zoom. We would love, love, love for you to fill this out, excuse me. We'd love to know what can go better, what other information you need. Our entire team, as I mentioned earlier, is entirely focused on being as helpful as possible to get you all through this moment. So we can do that better if you tell us what you need. Second, we will do webinars for the next 4 weeks. We will share updated information. We will share what experiments we're running with partners. We will share what we're seeing across the organization, economic trends, et cetera. Across the industry, economic trends, and how all of this is affecting the charitable sector and your own work. Sign up for those in the survey. If you aren't able to make it, they will all be on Tuesdays at noon Eastern. We will send the recordings. So sign up, you'll get the recordings. You may skip 1 or 2 because you're tired of me talking. We totally understand that, but we are there for you. And then third, our team is really, really here for you. So if you need anything at all, note it in the survey. You can email me at patrick@freewill.com. I will either get back to you or I will get to the right person at our organization who's an expert in whatever you need, or we will find a person outside the organization who is an expert in what you need. This is a challenging moment. Our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, their parents, we're all faced with different challenging moments, and it's a moment to be smart and thoughtful and kind. And so with that, please enter any questions you have in the Q&A, not the chat, which will be a little bit harder for me to follow. Please fill out that survey in the chat, and we'll go from there. A few questions. Great. This one is from JW Marshall. It says, given your fundraising experience, would you suggest that online days of giving and online annual fund efforts may be more effective during this unprecedented time? Any thoughts on how these activities can address donors' needs for social outlets? Yes, this is a great idea. JW, I don't know what type of organization you work with, but let me just give you a few ideas. Let's pretend for a moment that you're a small college who is hit with some challenges around lost revenue from sports, from food, from other services, as well as potential loss of tuition. Having an online giving day and having a virtual reunion for potentially every class, where you just open a couple of video chat windows, much like we do here, and maybe you have 1 or 2 leads from that class, or potentially a professor leading it, and just checking in and saying hello. Moments like this, people really value seeing familiar faces, even if those faces are from classmates decades ago. There's an anonymous question of what industries will be most impacted if you can measure it by the economic impacts. Should people expect to potentially lose their jobs by the end of this year? Sadly, we are already seeing some economic impacts. They are primarily focused on service industries, restaurants, bars, nightclubs, tourism, so cruise ships, obviously, airplanes. There will certainly be some knock-on effects there. We'll see a lot of it by the end of the year. Hopefully, we will recover and these will all come storming back. But you can imagine it's quite difficult for a lot of people. It's a really interesting question from Philip. So Philip, I'm sorry to hear about your experience. Philip says, hi all, I have been quarantined for nearly 10 days in New Jersey already. Our National Guard was called up. We're under a nightly curfew. Most businesses are closed. When I go to check the mail, I'm scared to touch it. For this reason, our org is canceling direct mail. We're hesitant to send anything about the coronavirus that's fundraising centric. Though because of the nature of our work, we are still sending communications emails. The overwhelming feeling is our part to hunker down on foundation support, etc. And the belief of management overall is no burdensome interaction. I love your thoughts. So one, there is no evidence that mail is dangerous, and that's important. You can't get it from a package coming from China. You can't get it from a letter. Again, this is not my opinion. This is what the research we did for the CDC before this webinar. So do not treat me as an expert here. I think if you believe that the work you do matters, and I trust that you do, you should still be asking folks for support. It is not the case that you can rely on additional foundation support, because foundations grow their endowments through investments, and most of those investments will be down suddenly. So this is a key point. Foundations may be helpful, but they will not fill a gap, and you can imagine that the stress on foundations will be extremely high. JR asked, do you suggest making phone calls to prospective donors, or should those just be put on hold? Can these suggestions be used for prospects as well? We highly suggest making phone calls to prospective donors. We do also suggest being thoughtful in that. So someone who's been involved in your organization in the past, you say, great, we just wanted to call and say thank you. We wanted to check in on how you're doing. We wanted to share some items. Are you interested in learning about different ways to help? And you may want to come back to a couple of different options as well. But people will be answering the phone and interested in talking to people who are being kind. Can you provide any suggestions for remote outreach for social service or human service organizations like the Salvation Army? Andrew, that's a great question. Similarly, this is an area where you want to hop on the phone with your folks. Many of these, from a donation standpoint, emails will also be really productive here. People want to know what you are doing in real time. So I don't have perfect information about your Salvation Army chapter, but if you're delivering food, if you're visiting the sick, if you're delivering much needed supplies, tell that story and tell it well, and it should resonate with folks. Give people also an avenue for donating, but also maybe even for sending messages to people. And so doing more. People want to be asked to step up. And one of the best things for their own happiness will be the ability to help others and feel useful. Cheryl says, thank you. I would like to share ASAP with my colleagues. Cheryl, it's going to take us an hour or so to process the video, and then we will get this to you. Tracy said, can you share the shocking stats on how few millennials have wills, Gen X, etc., so needed? So Tracy, this is a great point. There's an estate planning crisis in America. Fewer than half of all people have legal wills. At least 70% have either no will or a lack of up-to-date estate plans. This includes more than half of baby boomers and includes more than half of parents. So that is extremely needed, crisis or not. Thank you, Tracy. Keith asks again, is there a way to send audio or PowerPoint? Yes, we will send this to you in an email, probably in an hour and a half. So keep an eye on that. We'd love it if you share with colleagues. And feel free to have them fill out the survey or other things. If they need help, we're here for them. Great question from an anonymous attendee. Since the 2008 recession, it seems like there's more income inequality with folks like Bezos. How do you see that affecting or impacting the potential recession that is coming? This is a great question. We don't know. Our sense from past recessions is that bigger donors are more susceptible to revenue shocks and recessions than small donors. So we would urge people to continue small dollar work. You may see some big grand sweeping efforts from folks like Bezos and Gates, but it's unlikely that that will be a widespread distribution to small nonprofits. All right, I'm going to take a few more questions, And then I'm going to save some of these to answer next week because there's a bunch of research, and rather than just talk out of the top of my head. Angela wanted to remind us that regarding postal mail, it's important to wash hands after picking up and sorting mail. That is definitely true. It's a great question about the political climate, which I probably am not qualified to answer, so I'll pass that for now. Here's a question. Do you have suggestions for how to speak to children about what is going on? How can we encourage their empathy for others in the situations? What are things we can do with our kids to encourage their empathy and giving in these times? It's a great question, and I have 2 godchildren, a niece and a nephew, have been thinking about this. Here's what I would say. I see this even with our youngest staff members, where these are folks who are too young to have a really strong working memory of what 9/11 was like. And if they were born in the States, may not have been through any similar shock to what we're seeing now. And then they talk to their grandparents, and the grandparents are sort of shrugging. Not that they don't take this seriously, but some of them saw World War II, or the Great Depression, or the Vietnam War, the oil shocks, Chernobyl, all these things. And I think telling kids the world is an unusual place and big things happen. And when those big things happen, we need people to be heroic and be kind to each other. And that's probably the message that I would share. I also don't have any children of my own, so I have tons of empathy for people who are working from home with a couple of kids running around right now. God bless you. All right. Anyone has any questions that they're just dying to ask, feel free to post them right now. If not, I know everyone has a lot of work to do, and so we can close here. Maybe I'll close with one thought. And my colleague Jenny, my co-founder, who's brilliant, introduced me this idea of a worry sprint, which means that there's just so much to be anxious about right now. And her idea was that you take 10 or 15 minutes a day and you worry pretty intensely. You read the news, you think about whether or not you have enough toilet paper, etc. And then when that's done, you give yourself permission to push it out of your mind for a little bit, so it's not in the background all day. And if you need to, you can transition. One of the things we do on our team is 5 or 10 minutes of just kindness. So just text a couple of friends, we use Slack, send an email to someone you care about, and just get out of your own head for a moment and think about what you can do for other people. So give that a shot this week. Let us know next week if that's worked for you. Send any of your questions to me over email or via the survey. And we hope that you will be here next week in a rapidly moving environment, and we hope that you are successful in the week to come. Take care and talk to you all soon.